3 glasses of water.
Good afternoon, Sangha. Just a few announcements before Dharma today. Just a reminder for those of us here to silence our phones and those of us at home in virtual land to mute it. No, sorry, mute. I'm sorry, not mute. Pause YouTube. And then follow the directions to go to Facebook, but we should be good. All right. And for those of us in virtual land, if you can mute your microphones. Our retreat's coming up. Finding Freedom in Compassionate Presence with Lisa Ernst. That will be from June 23rd to the 27th. So as always, for more information and to register, please visit the retreat page on our website. Venerable Panawati will be offering a new book study that began last Thursday. Classes will be each Thursday at 5 p.m. The book will be Learning from Buddha by Buddha Master H.H. Dory Chang. If you are interested in joining, please visit the retreat page on our website. You can go, and then you'll select book study, and you'll see the link to register. Novena prayers are now occurring monthly every third Thursday. The next one will be Thursday, June 17th, the time to be announced. We invite you to join us on our YouTube page. Please send your confidential prayers for yourself or loved ones that can include pets as well, who are sick, suffering, misfortune, or departed. You can send those to prayer@heartwoodrefuge.org. Fully vaccinated Sangha members are now invited to Heartwood for Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday Dharma. And some of you are here today, so nice to see you all. And lastly, please follow, like, and share Heartwood and Thrifty Treasures on all social media to help spread the Dharma and further Heartwood's mission. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hello, hello, Kidesh, Raya. Hello, hello, Kidesh, Raya. Hello, hello, Kidesh, Raya. Alo, alo, Kiteshvaraya. Alo, alo, Kiteshvaraya. Alo, alo, Kiteshvaraya. Can you sing it with me one time? Hello, hello, Kideshvaraya. Hello, hello, Kideshvaraya. Hello, hello, So I said I wasn't talking today, and I'm not. I really want to hear how your week has been, and then we'll get our assignment for this week coming. So our assignment was to recognize how often our ears run out to listening, talking, thinking. Investigate the sounds. When the light goes down, it takes time, then we can see more clearly what happens when the sound goes down. Just observe. Getting is setting your heart on something versus being. Versus being. the identity that comes from relationality. I am none, I am teacher, I am whatever. Things may change fast or slow, but we are always infatuated with someone or something. And then blame starts. They said they do this, they promised to do that. We made an agreement about this. If someone asks you to do something or why you did something, see what arises. And the third was recognize our view and how well we do with clinging or not clinging to it. See how flexible we can be with our view. Flexibility of allowing another view to be present instead of trying to convince them that their view is wrong without grasping or identifying with it. There is a status that comes with it. We don't have the custom of yielding or of group harmony. Find and unleash your inner strength. So first of all, how many did focus on this week before we waste our time? Okay, so we have enough who did so that we can start a dialogue. And I'll start off with Dina's because she's not here, so she sent hers. And she said, I'm going to give you the gist of it, you know, Dina. She said that she noticed that she always finds peace and joy and calm and serenity in the woods, with the birds, the critters, the wind, the tree limbs, and the water, and how she loves the dark. And like when she goes running, she doesn't run in the daytime. She runs in the night when the lights go down. And she found that to be serene for her. So she's wondering why is that? And so she said she realized that she could feel her ears buzz and vibrate, constantly seeking out sounds, wanting to hear something, and easily going into sensory overload, and then she just hyper out. And so she said that she's aiming now, and she was all this week aiming for that quiet. And in doing so, there seemed to be almost a terse, adverse reaction to the sensegate of noise. The other thing she observed was she had a coworker take 6 weeks leave, and she had a huge opportunity to practice because she felt my coworker left me and I had to take over her workload, and she took it all personally. And she said, but I realized this week that I was taking it personally, like she's not mine, and it didn't have anything to do with me. And she said, so I recognized that I'm entitled to nothing. No one owes me anything aside from whatever I owe to myself. And she said, I realized that there are probably plenty of people who think I owe them something, just like I've been thinking people owe me something. So she said, I found it a lot cleaner to do something like taking over her students without carrying a payback mentality and just simply doing the things because the need arose. They needed to be done. It was the right thing to do. And that doing right is a reward all in itself. Internal motivation, meeting intention of right actions, allows for a true heart space, and it's feeling really good. Even when it's hard and exhausting, and not simple or easy, I recognize it's a growth process in itself. It's kind of a crucial step in not getting pissed off. And that's the truth. So this is how we grow, by making observations about what we're putting into practice and what we're not putting into practice. And like, how is that working for you? And it doesn't matter whether you get pissed off or not. It doesn't matter whether you're perturbed. It's recognizing. In time, along with the recognition, there comes the realization, and then one can begin to ease into a pattern of doing what needs to be done without thinking so much, I am doing, or I am doing because they're not doing. Leaves the equation. And it's that thinking, that part, that creates our suffering. And so we know that we work hard at things we like doing, but find difficulty working hard at things we don't like doing. And that's a discrimination of the mind. It has nothing to do with the actual task. So what if we made everything we did an offering to others? What if we just change how we think about what we do or what we say? We might not even have to change what we do or what we say, but just how we think about it, how we approach it, how we execute it mentally, I'm saying, and see what happens and how we then view and hold each day. So the floor is open for sharing. Let me see those hands again. Who said they did this one? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'll start. The one I want to share about was when our ears go out to hear. I didn't so much get to the letting that settle and seeing what else, what happened at that point, because an insight bubbled up. And it was during the last retreat we had here. I came and sat with them in the mornings, and I tried to arrive early so I had time to settle in before everyone else came in. And I think it was the second or third day, I noticed every time someone walked in, I would hear their feet, and then my mind would start wondering, what they think about their practice, if they notice how they're walking, and all these stories, just by the way they're walking, And by that third day, I caught my mind, and once I settled in that and just paused for a second, what arose was that my mind wanted to formulate all these stories and judgments because there's not yet a trust that there is a wisdom deeper than that can handle that situation. And so what I noticed was it was me trying to it was the mind grabbing onto something and then me saying, ooh yeah, let me take this further, because I don't yet know that there's a wisdom deeper, that I don't have to worry about what they're doing or why they're doing what they're doing. For me, it was this moment where I realized that I can let go of wanting to know and wanting to figure out and following the story and creating more stories, and just sit in the not knowing, because there is a deeper wisdom that I just don't have as much access to right now. So it felt like, for me, the beginning, it was oh, this makes so much sense, but it felt like, now you're at square one, for real. And so I've been sitting with that, and it's hard, because it's not suddenly that way of thinking and my wanting to follow that just goes away. But it feels like square one, but a good square one. It feels like a step forward, but also just square one. So that's the one that came.
Thank you. So you notice how it's hard to not judge when you start learning things. Because as soon as we start learning something, we look around and see who's doing it or who's not doing it. They had a training on walking softly and lining up your shoes neatly. And then I come bounding in, and my shoes are all helter-skelter. And they were going to straighten up my shoes, and I don't care if they want to straighten them up, that's okay. But it was going to make me straighten up my shoes, because it just really didn't matter about the shoes, So I tell you, go to any temple, anywhere in the East, and nobody's shoes are lined up straight. They just kick those shoes up and get in that Dharma hall, right? So it's really funny how when we take something, now, if there's something in it for you, then one should do that and neatly place and neatly place them, you know. But it's that when we learn something, we start requiring that everybody else do it. We start wanting to instruct people on the right thing to do. But most of all, we judge them on what they're not doing. And that's a natural tendency. That's a worldly tendency. It's an ordinary tendency. It's from almost the time that we are at least born in this world, we're taught to make judgments and assessments about everything. And it's what causes a lot of our dissatisfaction. It has nothing to do with anything but our judging mind. But what it also does is it obscures what we need to focus on. And I'm saying find joy and pleasure in what you do. And I think that's what he was saying, that he recognized how the mind automatically goes to judge and to separate, and to maintain our contentment, and for our contentment to grow. We sang Avalokiteshvara's name today, in case you didn't know what that was. And the purpose was just to arouse the meaning of the name, which is one who is full of compassion and power. So it's not just compassion, it's compassion and power. And the basis of our power is our joy and our non-judgment for both ourselves and for others. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think some of that, can I just talk freely? Okay. So I think, and some of that is because that's his tribe. That's his tribe, but he's been here, and he'll be here for a year, and he's going deeper and deeper in study, and he's finding out that how much you pick up, I think, just from being in a certain environment. So he said, wow, I was so excited. I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. He said, I was so excited when the Sangha, to find out that the Sangha was going to come back. But see, he's learned so much because the Sangha gets whatever, 45 minutes a week or 2 hours a week. But he's on call 24/7, learning. So his growth is exponential because he's vested, 24 hours a day at this. And so he was like, oh, they don't know this and they don't know that and they don't know the other. And he wasn't like complaining. He was like a little bit let down because he said, oh, what? They've been studying for what, 5 years, 10 years? And, he said, so I thought I was going to see what I'm going to be like in 5 years or 10 years. And so that's what happens if we have expectations, right? So we just have to have joy in our own growth and in our own progress. And the more we grow in that, the more compassionate we will be for others wherever they are. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Who's next? Yeah.
I had some thoughts on the second and third one together, wrapped up with what you talked about with ice the other day. How instead of talking about, can anybody hear me? Instead of talking about clinging, talking about ice, holding on to ice and working with letting it melt. And I was talking to somebody who works with people with disabilities, which I've done for a long time, and the person was saying that it's such a joy and it has been such an amazing experience, and talked about all the beauty of their perception and experience and interactions with people. And I wanted to agree with the person, and verbally I did, and then afterwards I felt such pain and such sorrow from my experience. And I like to think that I can take any kind of sorrow or suffering that comes my way, and but seeing people cause suffering of others and let others do their own suffering, I have not been able to figure out. And I was trying to see it as ice and let it melt. And instead what came up for me was seeing it as stone, and I was trying to melt the stone, thinking of the people I work with, letting people with disabilities hurt themselves enough that they have to be hospitalized, and just seemingly be okay with that. And as I was trying to melt the stone, I realized that I'm probably coming at it wrong, because there is no way to melt stone. So what I found is that I have some delusion around something, and I am stuck, and so it's not ice, and I can't melt it. And so, like Santikara, maybe I am at step one, but at least I know I am at step one.
So when we see suffering and we see others causing harm, or we feel an obligation, one of the 10 grave precepts is not to do harm, and also to try to prevent others from doing harm. So that part of the thinking is right, you know. And it takes wisdom to know how to handle those situations, especially like in your case when you're on a job where you work with people. My daughter was what do you call it when your kidney started from dialysis. My daughter was a dialysis technician, and she said that she constantly witnessed people dying, you know, and they didn't have to die. They died because, you know, the technicians were talking and conversating with each other, and they didn't notice something happening, or mostly it came from technician error. And they made it clear to her early on that this is the way it is in this business, and you're not to say anything. And so she said, well, Mom, what can I do? I said, well, you're not going to have to do much, because you've already talked about it, you know, and you've already reported to your supervisor, who reported to her supervisor, who reported to hers, and they told you, if you want a job, keep your mouth shut. And that's where it ends. And what she did was she left the industry. She said, I'm not going to be able, you know, to fight it all. If I thought I could, or if I wanted to start a crusade, if I want to bring it out in the open and follow that wherever it goes. And that's one thing she said, I personally am not up to that, you know. So she went and got another occupation. So all the time we don't have the capacity, and we cannot take on the responsibility. Some things require more than just recognition. I always ask the question when I see something that needs to be done, you know, am I the one to do it? Am I the one to do it right now? Am I the one to do it in this particular way? We have to ask ourselves all of those questions. And if we find that it's too difficult for us, you know, it's very difficult to have faith in someone that has a knee out of joint, you know, or a broken leg. I remember when I first started working with the homeless, and up at the top end of my life, you know, I was able to do it, and do it successfully meaning do it with great joy, do it with skill, but early on in my life, I was introduced to it by Mitch Snyder, who's called the father of whatever, the homeless movement. But Mitch himself, who introduced me into this love and caring for the homeless, he committed suicide. Um, and it was right after we had, fought the government to recognize the plight of the homeless in Washington, D.C. And finally, just to shut us up, they gave us this great big office building, it sat between 1st and 2nd Street, D and E Street. I still remember the whole building. So it had, 300 rooms, 500 rooms. It was many stories tall. And this was, our first big score, first big win in making, bringing this plight out to the American people. And I guess about maybe 6 months later, we found him. He hanged himself in the basement of the building because he couldn't see what was being accomplished. He couldn't go for small victories. It had to be all or nothing for him, and he couldn't handle it. And a great light went out of the world, So we have to know what we can handle, and we have to know what ways we can contribute. And it may be by whistleblowing on something. It may be by writing letters. It may be by posting the story and bringing awareness to something. There are many different ways that we can help. But if we break ourselves down, then we're going to roll around in the sorrow of it. And we can't recognize that this is samsara, and this is a world where there is suffering. I'm not saying it's just suffering in our mind. There's suffering for real in this world. And the only way that we can survive it is in being able to hold our mind steady. And that goes with working with what we can handle without feeling that we didn't do enough, without, there's an adage that says a king never goes to war without counting up the cost, right? So we have to know what we're up for. And if you are, go for it. If you're not, get an ally or step back. Okay? Thank you. Yes, Rob. Oh, Josh.
On a completely different note, I had my teeth cleaned this morning, and I couldn't help but think I really wish I had been further along in understanding the sense gate hearing, because it was the thing that bothered me the most was the way that it sounded. I kept thinking about this beautiful way of explaining it that you said last time, which was, imagine you were a bird on a boat who goes out seeking for land, finds nothing and comes back. And in that way, whenever I hear something, I'm trying to let it be what it is without focusing on it, which I can relate to because that's how I first began understanding meditation, was not trying to stop my mind from thinking, but just not focusing on specific things. But I have to say, I find this particular one of hearing very, very difficult. When my students first come to me, I always do an analysis of what kind of learner they are. Do they learn by seeing? Do they learn by doing? Do they learn by hearing? And the more I know about that, it helps me teach them. I've also come to understand a lot of people's minds function differently, and they have a different way of understanding the world around them. It's really easy for me to blend out something that I don't want to see because I'm not a very visual person. I really understand the world through sound, so it's good that I'm a musician, I guess, right? I just think, there are some particular sense gates that are nearer and dearer to us somehow, and which makes, I think, maybe the challenge of letting them, hard to say, let them go or not focus on them too much, even more difficult than normal. I just didn't know if you had thoughts on that.
I do. So everyone, the sixth Zen patriarch said to study the Dharma is to study oneself. And so everyone knows or can know what their own propensities are, what their own obstacles are, where they have tough spots are. And that's what we should do. So a lot of times we major on the minors, or we go to our strong suit because that's easier than going to the places that scare us. And so, but what is most beneficial for us is to look and see what is my obstacle and try to focus our efforts in that way. So if I'm one who is always thinking, mind just constantly adding to the story, adding to whatever I see, adding to whatever I hear, then I know that thinking is where I should be focusing. And there are many different techniques to work with thinking, like when a thought comes up, to note that it has arisen, that it stays there for a while and then it goes away. So I can start to see how a thought's not my thought just because, it's almost like having a receiver and picking up a frequency. So a lot of the thoughts we have that not even ours, caught it from the person sitting next to us or across the room, because we have a mind that inclines in a certain way. So it's easy to tap in to a frequency and pick that thing up, and so sometimes it'll come like, where did that come from? That thought just came out of nowhere, But if we recognize that, then that's what we're going to focus on. For some of us, it's like itchy ears. Always got to be in the loop. Always got to hear what's going on. Always got to know something about something or somebody nosy, inquisitive. And so, and that's being like a busybody. So first of all, we have to decide where we're weak, where our obstacles are, and what causes us problems. The thing is that once you really touch the zone, I like to call it the sweet spot, where that becomes subdued in you, and the more you touch that spot, the more you know where that spot is, the more you know, and you begin to observe how you got there. It's just like getting directions to the store. When somebody tells you go 2 blocks, see a stop sign, go right, there's a field, cut across the field, and when you see the oak tree right behind, just keep going that direction and there's the store. Okay, so in the beginning you're following the directions. But after a while it almost becomes automatic. Your whole body, that's how we're wired, we're marvelously made, and it starts to help you, and the direction to get there. Now the thing is that when you first started going there, it took you a certain amount of time. Now when you go, it might take the same amount of time, but it doesn't seem like it's taking any time, because you know where it is, and not so much of you is invested in following the route to get there. So now you start to enjoy the journey, to the store. You start to be freer. You don't have to put so much concentration in it. And that's how we will get, if hearing was the problem for me, every time I hear something that bothers me, instead of maybe identifying it as a screech, as a whatever, I just call it sound, sound. Not differentiating what kind of sound, just sound. And then after a while, the more that I'm descending into the peace or the serenity of meditation. And it has, believe it or not, it has its own kind of sound. That's the whole thing. And one sound, that sound of silence, replaces other sound. And the more I start to appreciate that sound, the less inclined I am, or the less I'm interested in the previous sound. And so whenever the ear, the bounces off of that, it starts to come right back because it's not interested. It's just not interested. It's just not interested. It's like you can become so engrossed in a television show or something that we're doing, knitting, as this case does all the time. Doorbell ring, don't even hit a doorbell, because you're so engrossed, so totally consumed, wanting to be right here, that doesn't even register. So when one stops wanting to name and note every sound, that's that discriminating mind that's identifying for you all of this that you don't like, and maybe a lot that you do like, when it becomes, I'm not interested. Like with the visual, that you can easily turn off because that just doesn't ring your bell. Yeah. So in the same way, we go to the one that's an obstacle for us. And when you have that breakthrough and find that the mind actually controls all of this, your reaction, your response to your liking, that's how you begin to like things you don't like, and you can not like things you used to like, because the mind, actually you control all of that. We think it's outside of our control, but absolutely it's not. It's just what are we willing to do, and what are we really interested in doing. Yeah. So I called on you, Rob, because I saw you put your hand up, and I know you did your work. I know you're always doing it.
Yeah. So for me, about the assignment, honestly, it was the second and the third part. The third part, we talk a lot about views in this path, right? But I think it takes, or at least for me, it's taken a while to really unpack what that even means, experientially versus just intellectually understanding. A view is like how I see something out of my particular window of reference. But my wife, she decided after 12 years she's not going to be a teacher anymore, and she was trying to muster up the courage to communicate this to her principal. And I'm already having a party, like I get my wife back. And, we get to chill outside of the never-ending stress of that job, And then, and I was kind of getting annoyed with her because she kept putting off having a conversation with this woman, and then the stress and the anxiety of not having that conversation was causing her to be really unsettled. And finally she did tell her, and honestly, it kind of just opened up a period of real tenderness for her, because I realized she's having to lay down something that she really loved and thought was deeply meaningful, because right now she has to kind of get in touch with that which has to fold inward and take care of herself. And so I was like, in my mind, my view was like, you should be ecstatic, like we should be having a celebration from here to Beijing and back. And in her mind, it was, I don't need you to kind of list all the reasons why this transition is good for me. I need you to just be present for me. in a place where I'm tender, you know. So I had to kind of just, because I'll notice when she's tender, she'll start preferencing and like get up and be like, you should do this and you should do that. And I'll be like, your personal preferences. And then my preferences react to that, you know. And so like the work with that was just to release the view that she should be doing it any different from the way that she is doing it. And that even though her job caused her a lot of stress and ultimately sickness, like it was still like a deep part of her heart, and it's okay to be tender. You know? And that kind of switches that switches the it switches the temperature and the intention that I bring to it, right? Like we talk about training attention and intention. The intention is like, let me be sweet to her instead of like focusing on the fact that she's having a lot of anxiety about leaving something that I thought wasn't good for her to begin with, you know? So that was kind of the relinquishment of a big view and a restabilizing, you know? And then the other side of what I wanted to talk about was this notion of like getting and becoming. They're all just kind of different flavors of selfing, right? But I noticed, you know, like they offered me a job at work, and it's to run a restaurant, and it's a really busy place, and like part of me, if I don't watch my mind, it can get into that story of like, you had all these plans for what you're going to do with your life and who you're going to be, and now you're 43 years old and like you're going to run a burger joint, you know? And I know that that's that mind that like is striving to become something, and I see the content of that, and I know the futility, right? But it's more like me learning to uproot the operating system that pushes my mind in that direction. Yeah. So I've been just trying to sit with that maxim of being ordinary and being here and now, you know, and sometimes I've been successful with it and sometimes I haven't. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you so much. I have my phone, and I have something in it that I want to share. It's amazing how we go through a period of mourning whenever we're changing. Even when we know we need to change, we know we want to change to be happier, we go through a period of mourning. Why is that? Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Why are we more find even good change such a challenge for us?
Because the old self is dying?
Because the old self is dying. What's another way that we could say that?
It sort of causes like a life reviews where we're forced to like meet the lingering emotions that are attached to particular identities, and it just doesn't feel good. Or sometimes I think we relate to it in a way where it doesn't feel good.
So I think both of you are saying getting right at the core, the attaching to particular identities. And like, this is who I am. And if I don't do this, then who am I? Have I wasted my time? You know, wasted my life? Or what shall I be? You know, the Buddha said this is where we get all turned around. Like what was I in the past? What shall I be in the future? And this is what causes us to have crises in our life. You know, most people have like a middle-age crises, but you know, now teenagers are having crises. Things are so accelerated, moving so fast. Every time there's a outer shift, we go through some kind of crisis. Like, what does this mean for me? How do I have to change? But how will it affect me? How will people see me? Children like 13 and 14 committing suicide because they don't feel like they belong or have any sense of who they are, because they have nothing that they're fastened to or tied to, because everything we see in society tries to label us, group us, categorize us, give us an identity that we freely take and then try to live up to. So a lot of this freedom that the Buddha talks about, I was talking to I gave the parting Dharma talk yesterday to the retreatants that were here, and I said, like, I've observed you all this week, you had a bell to wake you up. You had a bell that told you when to go do walking meditation. You had a bell to let you know when it was time to sit. And you had a bell to let you know it was time to get out of sitting. And you had a bell to know when it was time to eat. And you had a bell to know it was time to go to bed. And I said, good thing you don't come to my retreats, because you wouldn't know what time to get up if you missed the last class, because I announced it at the last class. If you weren't there, you have no clue. I said you would know what room to meet in, because we're not always meeting in this hall and you don't have a written schedule. You just have to show up. And if you miss it, you'll come to the last classroom where we were and nobody will be there but you. You won't have, and the whole object of it is to take people out of this kind of routine and this kind of identification with the things that we do that formulate our preferences and our views, and allow us to freely bump up against the present moment and decide in that moment, just using wisdom about how to move or what needs to be done or what's called for. It causes us to stay engaged, to stay active with life. That's the whole spirit of this thing. That's the whole spirit of freedom, but we get so caught in our views about ourselves, our identifications, our routines, our schedules, even what we think we know, that we like sleep through life. When he was talking about waking up, he was really talking about waking up. And to not sleep through life, that every day becomes an adventure. Every day there is something to know. There's something to come up against and come away with more than you had before. Whether it was a lesson learned, and sometimes those can be rough, but nobody can take away from you a lesson learned. That's for sure. One knows when one has learned something, whether it was through hardship or whatever. One can hold the hardship because they have learned something, they have acquired more wisdom. But we keep going back to the old thing. We keep going back, and our life becomes, our mentality becomes like a cesspool, just stagnant. And so he was inviting us to step into a kind of newness where every day is a new day, where every day has a certain immediacy, is that a word? Has a certain, present here now, and that we could see that we have really no need for identity. Is like baggage. We have no need for it. The thing that I'm learning at this stage of my journey, it's like I hear you tell me, like funny, like you said last week, sometimes like I said that, because maybe I did utter the words, but I have no recollection of saying that, because wisdom can't be captured, and hell, we don't own it. So, but if we will be free and unencumbered, then wisdom can arise and wisdom can speak, then it's done. So in that way, we don't hold things in our life. And in that way, like he says, like, you know, you can have views, just don't be attached to them. And after a while, one stops having preferences around their views. They may still have a view, you know, but they're not clinging so tenaciously to it. Because to cling to it is to cling to what we already know or have had some experience of that tells us this is at least partially true and it's not totally true, you know, because I've had the direct experience of it. So that's the known thing. You know, it's not so much what we know, it is what is unknown, what there is to know, and making room for that, making room for the unknown. There's such a great talk within Christianity about the mystery, the great mystery. And that has its place because it gets us unstuck around what we already know. But I'm going to tell you, mystery is just what you don't know yet. So don't get stuck in the mystery either. You know, just keep moving towards what can be known. But the way that we know is to just simply release the knowing, releasing what we already know. And as we back away from that, what we don't know has an opportunity to come into view. So I think that sometimes it's not so comfortable when we're doing work where we're having to focus, you know, on ourselves, when we're having to look at our life. We have to look at what we're doing. But if we don't do that, then we're not going to have peace. You know, and there's going to always be chaos around us. But the peace comes with the gratitude of non-grasping. You know, that's where our peace in our life comes. I was watching TV yesterday, and now, you know, we come up with more diseases. So now we have a new disease. I forget what they called it, but it's something like the going back to normal anxiety, and how you could just say like that's a real thing. You know, like if you make that a real thing, the anxiety of just going back to our normal everyday life. So, you know, haven't we all been living every day? Even, we make up stuff, and then we try to live up to the stuff we make up. You know, whether it's good or whether it's not good. And so this week, I think I would like to ask you. There's a saying, and I'm not sure who said it, but it says, in the sky, there is no distinction of east and west. And somebody needs to be taking this down for the assignment for this week and send it out to you. In the sky, there is no distinction of east and west. People create distinctions out of their own minds and then believe those distinctions to be true. In the sky, there is no distinction of east and west. People create distinctions out of their own minds and then believe these distinctions to be true. So I'd like to ask you this week if you will look and see, notice when you're creating a distinction between you and someone else. And when you note it, how could you go back and review that engagement if you hadn't crafted that distinction we can't keep regurgitating the same old things. We have to move on. So we can't keep thinking and fixing in our mind the difference between, the difference between how men respond to things and women respond to things. The difference between how blacks see something and whites see something. The difference between how the wealthy see something and how the poor see something. And I'm not saying that that we're not sitting, touching the elephant from different sides. I'm talking about the obstacle that is raised when we raise the question or the point of distinction.
You mean like remove the taint by seeing it, but then take it a step further and be like, what is it about the way that we habitually fabricate that leads to that taint?
So I mean, like, if two people are having a conversation and they are like see it two very different ways, how do I immediately label that person as different? Now they're no longer just a person. They are an angry person, or they are a black person, or they are entitled person, or a privileged person, or they're a ghetto person, or they're, we immediately, if there's a view that's different from ours, we have to label that something different from us. You're not like me, And I want us to see how often we do this, and how that's, and what kind of obstacle it brings to harmony. It's like if something goes awry, it's rare that our first inclination is they misunderstood me. It's like it has to be, well, they were like trying, it has to be subterfuge, or it has to be, like, well, how about like, maybe they just forgot. Or maybe, our go-to place is never the least harmful. Our go-to place is never the most accommodating, We have to go through 3 or 4 cycles before we get to where maybe they just forgot, Yeah. And so I want us to look at it and see if we can try, because it's going to happen. It's going to come up, because that's our ordinary nature. But I'd like for us to try. I mean, I had an example today because I forgot that the store manager was coming in late. I was just rejoicing last week because her daughter turned 16 and she's going to go for a driver's license today and try to get a test. And I was so happy for her, but I forgot between Friday and today. And so I sent her a text and I said, Tammy, you don't have to come in early today to set up the store because we set it up. I'm so happy we set it up for you the other day, so you could like just come in late today. You don't have to get there till 9:30. The store opens at 10. You don't have to come at 8. And I'm thinking, what a good job I did for Tammy, right? And so I got there about maybe 2 minutes after 10, and people were, lined up to come in the store. I'm like, where's Tammy? And because I sent her a note saying you don't have to come till 9:30. That's an hour, 9:30? Yeah, hour and a half later, and she's not here. And so I'm running to open the door, and I said, Tammy, call me. So she calls me, and she says, oh, I reminded you. She said, don't you remember? I'm a DMV today, And so I'm thinking, well, obviously I didn't remember because I sent her a text and said you could come late at 9:30. So obviously I didn't remember, And I was right there. I was right there with it. because I took offense. Like, I might have to have a talk to her. Like, if she knows my memory's not good. If I send you something and it looks like I forgot, chances are I really did. But that was just my way of reacting to my first thought. My first thought couldn't be that something occurred that she couldn't be there on time. My first thought couldn't be, that she didn't get the text. My first thought was that those weren't my first thoughts. So I made a judgment about the whole situation, and then started backing up to lesser offense. And that's our natural tendency. And if we're not careful, good people do these things. Good people like us do these things. And so the Buddha says we should note what we don't do well. He said we should also note what we do well. Because if we note what we don't do well and just keep noting, the mind just erases the negative part, the not, and it just reinforces that thing. But when we note what we do well, without any sense of ego, but just with seeing the accomplishment, remembering how we felt when we gave somebody benefit of the doubt, remembering how good we felt when we were gracious instead of rude. Because there's a feeling that goes with all of this. And then I don't like people who are too sweet anyway, because I think it's like contrived, but that's just a view in my head, right? And that's because I used to be too sweet. I'm going to tell you, a lot of it was contrived. But I can't say that that's the case for you. Maybe you just like that. You're just too sweet. So these views that we hold are really deep inside of us. And if we don't go deep, the Dharma will not uproot them. It'll be like throwing the grass seed on the top of the grass without first running that thing that punches holes in the aerator. It makes a difference in how well the grass takes root and how thick it grows. So we're spending this year deepening our walking out of the Dharma. And it may not feel exciting because the ears are itchy to hear stuff, But I tell you, it would be a shame to walk this path and get to the end and don't pass the test. Yeah. And there is somewhere to go. There is something to master. Or you could say it's something to inherit. Yeah. And that's why we walk this path, because we believe that there is a better way to live. There's a more compassionate way we can be in the world. And that compassionate wisdom has its own joy without suffering. Everybody's got their assignment. Any way that landed on you. And don't worry, just use that like a little tag to start tripping your awareness. I don't use that word a lot, but in this case, yeah. So that you can just note, we're noting things about ourselves, because to study the Dharma is not cultivation. It's actually to do it is cultivation. It's 1:15 and I'm going to close unless there's anything anyone else would like to share. Okay, and I want to apologize. I think last week, maybe it was Thursday, we sang a song And I'm not so sure we're at song singing stage yet. You know, like group, congregational song singing. We probably need to give it another month or so, you know, because we're out in the world and we're with people. I just saw on TV last night that it's against the law for me to ask. Did you know that? It's against the law to ask people if they are vaccinated. You can't ask your employees. You can't ask people who come to your place. Now, you can ask them to wear a mask, but you are not supposed to ask them, are they vaccinated? Now, I just can't understand for the life of me how we're going to get beyond this, because I feel like that's going to encourage some people who are not, that, you know, like don't ask, don't tell policy. But I am asking you, if you really have not, please don't come. And I'm going to send out an email, since I've been told that I can't ask people. I'm going to just put in the email to say something like, for all of us who come, our Sanka family, that this is our home, this is where we live. And to just try to, you know, to ask them to use their hearts and minds. It's, well, I talked to my master about it. You know, she said, well, that's what they say, but this is my place. They got to bring their, I'm not only asking them, they have to bring their card when they come. You know, they just not coming in here. And it's not a judgment on people who felt, you know, very convinced that they shouldn't, for whatever reason, take the vaccine. You know, it's just honoring a person's wishes in their own place. I'm sure they can understand that. But I just didn't know whether you knew that. And the next month, they say, we'll tell whether this is going to work for us. So. May you be well and happy and peaceful. May no harm come to you and no danger. May you always be able to meet the inevitable difficulties of life.